Thus far, every time the ESA, the ESRB, and lobbyists like EA have opened their mouths in an attempt to justify loot boxes, they have done nothing but make a fool of themselves in front of the entire gaming community. They have gone on record to say on numerous occasions that loot boxes aren't gambling, even when just about everyone else, from gamers, the media, government officials, to psychologists, agree that loot boxes employ the same psychological principles as slot machines. Sure, one could argue that there are aspects that delineate predatory microtransactions and loot boxes from the legal definition of gambling, but the fact remains that they are still a genuine hazard to people's mental health and financial stability, no matter what you call them. And there is no system in place to keep game publishers at bay from pushing the envelope too far. Just about everyone acknowledges this except for the entities who stand to greatly profit from loot boxes. But they can only ignore this issue for so long, as government officials are quickly encroaching on the gaming industry's irresponsible indifference to loudly expressed concerns. Earlier this month, we saw New Hampshire U.S. Senator Maggie Hassan send an open letter to the ESRB urging them to review their rating system in light of loot box concerns, while putting the FTC on standby to do their own investigation on the issue should the ESRB not cooperate. After that, just a couple days ago, we saw Chris Lee question an ESA representative on camera during a public forum inside Hawaii's state capitol, and the representative failed miserably to make a case for the rampant gambling-like mechanics in video games.
So fundamentally, that seems to be gambling, if you can cash out these things for real monetary value. Is it not?
I cannot answer that.
Slowly but surely, pressure against the ESA, the ESRB, and lobbying game publishers is steadily mounting as the prospect of government intervention becomes more and more likely the longer they remain complacent. After long stretches of inaction, the ESRB finally presented plans to address the recent feedback yesterday, February 27th, 2018. But don't get too excited because, as you'll soon see on this official statement released via the ESRB's official Twitter page, their proposal is utter useless crap. The statement reads, quote, "You may have noticed that we have been a little quiet on the topic of in-game purchases and loot boxes, but we have been listening." Ah yes, the classic "we have been listening to" feedback statement. In fact, we have absorbed every tweet, email, Facebook post, and singing telegram that's made our way. I call bullshit on that. And we have been working to develop a sensible approach to let gamers and parents know when a game offers the option to purchase additional content. Starting soon, the ESRB will begin assigning a brand new label to physical games, in-game purchases. This label, or as we call it, interactive element, will appear on boxes and whether those games can be downloaded for all games that offer the ability to purchase digital goods or premiums with real-world currency. This includes features like bonus levels, skins, surprise items, such as item packs, loot boxes, mystery awards, music, virtual coins, and other forms of in-game currency, subscriptions, season passes, upgrades, e.g. to disable ads, and more. We are also launching a new website, parentaltools.org, to help raise awareness of the helpful tools that parents can use to manage the amount of time or money crafty kids spend playing games. This is the first step of many. We'll continue to discuss how to further enhance our rating system with publishers, developers, gamers, and especially parents, and we'll continue to make adjustments as the need arises. So there are two major problems with the proposed solution that I would like to highlight. Problem number one is that while the ESRB will be labeling games with in-game purchases, the way that in-game purchases are implemented will still have no effect on a game's rating. A game can employ the most predatory forms of loot boxes paired with a psychologically manipulative matchmaking system as patented by the likes of Activision and EA, and it would have no effect on whether it's rated E for everyone, M for mature, or AO for adults only. Problem number two is that the label in-game purchases casts way too wide a net. Instead of isolating insidious microtransactions and loot boxes as separate issues, the label also encompasses upfront and honest forms of in-game purchases like DLCs, expansions, subscriptions, so on and so forth. So a game like The Witcher 3, which offers fairly priced, sizable expansions, would be labeled the same as a game like Star Wars Battlefront 2, which was notoriously intended to base its entire progression system around pay-to-win loot boxes. So in the grand scheme of things, the introduction of the in-game purchases label does nothing to help people differentiate between games featuring honest, upfront transactions and games featuring psychologically manipulative, glorified gambling mechanisms. It's about as good a mandate as if alcohol regulation only required that all beverages be labeled liquid. The ESRB's proposed solution completely misses the point that people's qualms aren't with in-game purchases as a whole, but rather specific monetization models that are clearly devious in their intentions. Now, I can guarantee you that the ESRB is fully aware of this and that the cheeky bastards made a very deliberate tactical move to divert attention away from loot boxes and similar mechanisms by pulling them together with other forms of monetization schemes under the very general, large umbrella of in-game purchases, a label that, if you think about it, can be applied to almost every modern video game. What this does is make the ESRB come across as being proactive, when in reality they are circumventing the issue altogether with inconsequential stipulations. And for anyone who has doubts about the ESRB's deflective intentions, just look at what ESRB President Patricia Vance had to say to the press in defense of loot boxes following the introduction of the in-game purchases label. "We were unable to find any evidence that children were specifically impacted by loot boxes, or that they were leading them towards some tendency to gambling. We truly don't know of any evidence supporting those claims. We continue to believe loot boxes are a fun way to acquire virtual items. Most of them are cosmetic." Yeah, the keyword there is most of them. "But they're always earned and they're always optional." What a load of horseshit. The gaming industry unanimously complains about loot boxes, and all she has to say is that they believe loot boxes are fun and optional and that there is no evidence suggesting that they have any sort of negative impact on children or anyone with addictive tendencies for that matter. Yeah, well, some will tell you that casinos are fun and optional before those afflicted with addictive tendencies lose all their money. But unlike loot boxes, at least casinos have systems and regulations in place to mitigate the harm that they can cause, like a strict age restriction among other things. Unlike loot boxes, activities that are legally constituted as gambling are at least looked at with some level of scrutiny. Not to mention that with casinos, at least people know what they're getting into. They know they can walk in there and expect your pokers, blackjacks, roulettes, and slot machines. They go in there knowing they'll be gambling their money away. Whereas with games featuring loot boxes, you never really know what you're getting into. You could simply be expecting a great Star Wars game only to find a Star Wars themed casino instead. What is abundantly clear to me at this point, based on Patricia's statement, is that despite all the controversy, the ESA and ESRB have no intention of yielding on the matter of loot boxes. They have no intention of relinquishing their newfound goldmine, even if it comes at the expense of the medium that they represent and the consumers that they're responsible for. This is especially apparent by how, after all that's happened, all the ESRB has contributed is a pathetic attempt at diverting attention away from the real issue by proposing phony solutions. I pray that Chris Lee and other legislators who have joined in the battle against loot boxes don't fall for this ploy, that they continue pushing for their fair and sensible anti-loot box bills they have presented thus far, and that they keep applying pressure. The only thing I can kind of give the ESRB some credit for is the recent launch of their Parental Tools website, which provides links for step-by-step instructions on how to limit in-game purchases on the various video game platforms platforms available right now. Now, I say kind of because this is still a very indirect and ineffective way of addressing the issue of loot boxes. As far as kids go, parents would have to be aware that loot boxes are potentially harmful in the first place and know that parental restrictions for in-game purchases exist in whatever console they got for their kids, neither of which are widely advertised. Not to mention that once kids become teenagers and can start earning their own money, they can easily buy their own home console and their own games, at which point the parental tools become practically useless. And before you argue that it's entirely up to parents to keep track of what their children are doing, while I do agree that parents are responsible for their children, that doesn't mean society shouldn't implement laws that make it harder for minors to do things they shouldn't be doing. For example, parents are certainly responsible for ensuring that their children aren't smoking cigarettes at an undeveloped age, but that doesn't mean cigarette laws and regulations like age restrictions shouldn't exist to add an extra layer of security. Which is why loot box regulation is so important, as restricting them to minors and disclosing their gambling-like mechanics would add an extra layer of security to make it less likely that underdeveloped minds will get hooked to this stuff. There's also the fact that the issue of loot boxes extends beyond just children. Adults with addictive tendencies can just as easily be negatively impacted by loot boxes. And for those adults who may want to avoid games with loot boxes, seeing games with the label in-game purchases will do nothing to help them differentiate ones with honest upfront transactions and ones with predatory and exploitative gambling mechanics. So all around, from top to bottom, the ESRB's newly introduced stipulations are utter lazy crap. And as much as I'd like to remain hopeful that something good can come off from the ESRB statement that, quote, "we'll continue to make adjustments as the need arises," after seeing how the ESRB president insisted that loot boxes are fun and harmless, I can't say that I'm hopeful. Well, I guess that leaves the government no choice but to kick the doors down, and when that time comes, the gaming industry will have nobody but itself to blame. These are just one man's thoughts, opinions, and perspective anyway. I'd love to hear what you think about all this in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon. It is completely optional, but donating even as little as $1 a month will go a long way in helping this channel grow. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.